Hi everybody, I'm Jyrki Petsalo from Finland, and I'm Symetri Finland, and I'm here just as a host, and I welcome you all here. And what was I saying? Yeah, this is breakout session, and we meet our sponsor Fernando Barrios from One-Click LCA. So, Fernando, please start.
Thank you, Jyrki. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this session. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, so you should be able to see it soon. There it is, and I'm just going to put it into the presentation mode. So today we're going to talk about how to automate climate declaration and other climate declaration regulations using one-click LCA. So first, I would like to talk about me. My name is Fernando Barrios. I work as a business developer for the Nordic, Iberia, and Latin American region for One-Click LCA. We recently changed our name. I'm an environmental engineer. I have a master's degree from KTH, Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. And I work mainly with building LCA, infrastructure LCA, EPDs, and GHG reporting. So talk about carbon requirements in Nordic countries. As you might know, today construction is measured in carbon. We have more and more regulations that are related to embodied carbon or life cycle assessment. And since we're talking about the Nordic countries today, we can say the Nordic countries are moving to regulate carbon footprint in the construction industry. So for example, in Sweden, we have a climate declaration is mandatory from 2022 with limit values for carbon footprint from 2027. The method is developed by Boverket, the National Housing Association, and this climate declaration is supported on One-Click LCA. Denmark, on the other hand, calculation is mandatory from 2023. This is for buildings that are above 1,000 square meters in size. And the method is also developed by the Danish government, and this is supported again on One-Click LCA. Finland has direct introduction of carbon footprint limits scheduled by 2025. This is developed by the Ministry of the Environment. This is supported in One-Click LCA. Norway, we're talking about mandatory for public buildings since a decade. Cities are introducing requirements as well. The method, well known, is the NS 3720. This is also supported by us. In Iceland, currently regulations under consideration, no method to be supported because there is no method yet. So we're talking about now 4 methods, 4 different databases, but just one LCA tool. And that tool is One-Click LCA because, as I said before, we support them all. And in fact, with One-Click LCA, we try to make it simple. We try to make it user-friendly to perform calculations. And I'm going to talk about a bit now of climate declaration, the Swedish climate declaration from 2022. This is going to be mandatory from 1st of January. This is buildings that are above 100 square meters. This is new buildings, by the way. The climate database contains around 171 generic materials and resources. But what you need to know here is that this generic database has something called a conservative factor. The conservative factor incorporates a 25% top up. So that means that the emissions in general are 25% higher than the typical value. You can complete these calculations using One-Click LCA for buildings. And because of this conservative factor that, as I said before, the emissions are going to be 25% higher than typical values, it is encouraged to use EPDs. With One-Click LCA, you can use manufacturer EPDs if they have them. And if they don't have an EPD, manufacturers can create those using our one-click LCA EPD generator. So we cover the whole chain. We've been deeply involved in the development of regulations. And one of those is actually the Finnish regulation. This started as a voluntary method in 2013. Later on, became a regulatory feasibility study in 2015, then regulatory roadmap in 2017, method 2018, and now we have regulatory limit values. We've been involved in each of these stages, and we are proud to say that because we're committed towards embodied carbon and to help the whole industry. So what about carbon requirement in other countries? Is this only in the Nordics? Is this in just specific countries? Well, embodied carbon is becoming the norm, actually, in the global green building rules and certifications. Here you can see in green color embodied carbon addressed, completely addressed, and embodied carbon not addressed. The source is the embodied carbon review. And you can see that we're seeing embodied carbon address regulation or certification or rules being addressed in each single continent, more or less. North America, South America, Northern Europe, continental Europe, Asian Pacific, etc., etc. So what we're seeing here, that this is not something isolated. This is not just in the Nordic countries, but this is actually global, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And since this is getting bigger and bigger, we need a platform to perform these calculations, and that's why we are the world's leading construction LCA software platform. We have clients in more than 100 countries. We support more than 40 certifications. Our data set is more or less more than 100,000 data points. We support integration with several software. For example, I can mention Revit, Tekla Structures, Rhino, Grasshopper. I'm going to talk a bit more later on. And currently, we're about 50 employees, and we're keep growing and growing, to be honest. We have verified LCA modules for LEED, BREEAM, and 40 plus other national and global system and standards. So for example, in Europe, we support BREEAM, we support Levels, we support Miljö Byggnad in Sweden, NS 3720, as I said before. North America, same with LEED, that's quite big in that region. Asia Pacific, Green Star. Infrastructure as well, we support SQL and Vision, among others. And as I said before, we have a database that is more or less 100,000 data sets, data points. And those are not just generic, because we also have EPDs, and not just EPDs from one particular region. We have EPDs from North America, from Europe, South America, etc. So our coverage is quite global. We try to connect the whole industry. So I said before that if you are working with climate declaration in Sweden, because of that conservative factor, it's better if you use EPDs because the emissions are going to get lower. But as I said before, it can happen that that EPD for a certain product doesn't exist. And that's why we have a different tool that helps you to develop and publish an EPD. And that's why in this picture here, you're seeing that we have engineers as customers, but we also have architects, we have manufacturers, we have builders, institutions, etc. Some of the names are quite well known here. You can see, for example, Rambo, Sweco, Skanska, etc. You know them quite well. So as can be seen, it's not that we focus just on one sector, just architects or just engineers. We really try to connect the whole industry to make it easier to perform life cycle assessment or embodied carbon calculations. So, and one way to make this easy is by automating carbon assessment. And one way to do that is with BIM. But there is only a few BIM tools that work well for the early phases. When you're in the design stage, not even the concept, not the concept stage, but the design stage, you usually use Revit or you can use Tekla. When you're at the build stage, you use Symetri, Microsoft Excel to have all the quantities, etc. But when you're in the concept stage, there are many, many tools that work well. Some of them that work well and they have that are quite well known are Rhinoceros, Grasshopper, or Tekla Structural Designer, for example. And this is very important to work in the concept stage because your influence on impacts is higher the closer to the beginning you are. So as you can see here, we have two arrows, let's say Y and X, and your influence on impacts when you're in the strategy stage is huge because you can define many things, you can design many things. But when you're already in the build stage, well, your influence and impact is quite low because everything that came before was already decided. We're talking about the location, the size, orientation, certain materials, etc. That was already designed. So of course your influence on impacts, and when I say impacts, I'm talking about mainly environmental impacts, is now low. So that's why it's important to start making changes in the concept stage. That's why we paid off to work with LCA in different phases of a project because we have different tools for that. It's not that we only work with the build stage or as build stage, etc. No, in fact, if you are in the strategy stage, we have one tool for it that's called Carbon Designer. If you're in the concept stage and you're using Rhinoceros or Grasshopper, we have integration with that, so we can make it easier for you. If you're in the design stage, we have been integrations, for example, with Revit, etc., etc. So in order to make it simpler, in order to make it more precise, we have different tools for each stage. And the BIM automation is available for over a dozen platforms. So if you are working with energy modeling and you're using Design Builder, for example, that is quite well known, we have plugins for it. If you're working with a design software, pure design software, such as Revit or Rhinoceros, we also have plugins for it. If you are working with Microsoft Excel, we can integrate that. If you are working with Symetri, we have plugins for that. So we have automation available for more than a dozen of platforms. And recently, we added this parametric LCA optimization using a Grasshopper. It can be seen here. So even if you are in this very concept stage in which you don't know the exact quantity of materials that you're going to use, you just know, like, okay, we're going to do this type of building, we're going to use concrete, this is the shape, this is the area, and that's more or less that I know. Well, you can do parametric LCA optimization using one-click LCA and using Grasshopper. That's not a problem. Grasshopper-based parametric LCA, you can see in real time how it changes your project's shape, affect its carbon emissions. You can also choose the materials you want to use and run a set of calculations for your LCA, as can be seen in the images here. And you can, of course, define your building parameters. I'm not going to cover here how to do this step by step because we simply don't have the time. But it's just for you to get an idea of what you can do with one-click LCA and Grasshopper. With Revit, we try to improve constantly our Revit plugin. In fact, we have released a new plugin quite recently. So here in the picture, for example, we're seeing one material that has been isolated, because you can absolutely do so. And now using the plugin in Revit, you can start matching materials with your material from your model, as can be seen here in the picture on the right side. So as can be seen here, you can also see the impact that is quite intuitive, because you have in different colors. So for example, very high impacts, average impacts, or low impacts, for example. You can see also the tons of CO2, the percentage in relation to the total. So it's actually quite intuitive and quite easy to use we provide, of course, different guidelines, and we provide support for this. There is a bonus, as I like to call it, and is that if you use BIM but you don't do LCA, you can use our Send Me Data feature. This basically works if you work with an LCA expert who needs data from us. You can use this. So as I said before, basically you use BIM, you have the BIM model, and you're not doing LCA, you can send this data to someone that actually has a one-click LCA license. This is usually an expert feature. This person will receive these and can start doing calculations. So carbon, we try, when you do LCA with us, we try to make it simple, but we try to make it easier to understand as well. That's why this is not just a software to provide, let's say, calculations and data, because it's important how you present data. So as you can see here, our software can generate data or can present data in different ways. For example, bar charts or column charts or a pie chart, Sankey diagrams, or life cycle impacts by material as stacked columns in different colors, etc., etc. So you can understand the results, and also you can act on them. You can see, okay, I see that in my building, let's say 75% of emissions are due to concrete, or now I see that 32% of emissions are due to the end of life scenario, for example. And you can start acting on it. You can start making comparisons. You can create alternatives and so on. Finally, I would like to invite you to a longer discussion that we're going to have next week on April the 20th, actually. This is a longer discussion of the climate declaration, specifically in Sweden. This is a free webinar. This is going to last 1 hour, maybe a bit more. It's going to be in both English and Swedish, and we're going to cover a bit more. So in this session that you just saw here, I showed you basically general information about the climate declaration in Nordic countries, why the conservative factor is increasing the emissions for generic data, and why it's better to use these. And also I showed you basically, and quite fast, that we support integration with different software. But here in this webinar that we're going to have next Tuesday, we're going to cover a bit more. So we're going to cover what's included in climate declaration in Sweden, what's not included, what's the stage of the LCA, and also we're going to show you how to do it with BIM models. And again, this is going to be in both English and Swedish. So if you're interested about it, if you want to see how one-click LCA actually works, because we're going to do it as an online demonstration, so I'm going to show you how to use the software, please join this session next Tuesday. That's pretty much it from my side. So thank you. If you have further questions, you can contact me here, fernando.barrios@bionova.fi, or you have also my phone number there. So that was pretty much it from my side. I guess we can take the last 5 minutes to answer some questions if there are any.
Crystal clear, I think.
Yeah, I see. I have a question that was what's an EPD? An EPD is an environmental product declaration. So basically, we're talking about a manufacturer that performed a life cycle assessment of one of their products. And this environmental product declaration is saying the impacts that this product has throughout its life cycle. Yeah, I think, thank you, Johanni, for your kind words.